Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 9 of this special program on Humanity Rising, dealing with the Conference of Parties that is going on in Glasgow and has been in continuous operation since the 1st of November. That's when Humanity Rising started and continues for the next several days, concluding on the 12th of November, this Friday. Over the time that we have been covering the Conference of Parties, we have been hearing from people there in Glasgow, both inside the conference and outside the conference. Over the weekend, we heard from various climate activists. There were at least 100, if not 150,000 people on the streets on Saturday and Sunday in a massive demonstration of frustration due to the fact that the governments, yet again, in this 26th year of the COP, are doing what they always do, engaging in platitudes while kicking the ball down the road for someone else later to deal with the problem. The problem being that we have run out of time. And as the Secretary General said in August, in preparation for this COP, we are now in code red. We're now in the climate tipping point. We're now in a situation in which escalating ecological turbulence is no longer avoidable. And that's something we all need to consider, everyone, as we begin to wind down the program on climate change on our 9th day. We've covered a lot of different issues, as you all know. Yesterday, it was on the cities as regeneration hubs for Gaia. Today, we're going to deal with the oceans, which is probably the largest tipping point in terms of size currently happening around our precious planet. Before we launch into our program, I think it's always good, as we always do on Humanity Rising as we begin our sessions, just simply to pause and just take a moment and center yourself in your body. Take a breath and align yourself with your heartbeat. Just take a moment, just a minute, to attune yourself with your own heart. See if you can listen and hear your heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and deep thanksgiving that you're alive. We're all alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey.
Ciao.
Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude for each and every one of you who are joining our session today, I want to begin our program before we turn to the oceans, to a couple, Basha Alexander and Jim Conroy, who have been in the Northern California forest fire regions, along with people coming in from Glasgow each day. They have been traveling around the forest fires in Northern California. And so I thought we would start before we move to the oceans, just to contemplate the devastation that's occurring in our forests, particularly here in Northern California. So I turn it over to Basha and Jim.
Oh, thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
We really appreciate this opportunity. So our motto is heal ecological damage, upgrade people's thinking. We have created a unique system of energy healing for trees and ecosystems, which we also teach. Our approach is to connect, communicate, collaborate, and co-create with the life force and intelligence of nature by using bioenergy overlap and interactions in consciousness. Jim.
I'm Jim Conroy, and what I did is yesterday, right in the Caldera fire, while I was in the zone working on the fire, I made a short video, very short video, and I'd like just to play that video for you, and it'll describe what we did in that fire.
And I am looking for it now. Here we go. Share there. Okay.
Good afternoon. Today is November 8th, and we're in the Caldera fire near Pollock Pines, California. So let me tell you a little bit about the work we had to do here with these trees, okay? First of all, it's important to understand that before the fire happened, these trees were already weak. Due to pollution, and primarily pollution, they weren't able to make enough food for themselves. Then what happened when they weren't able to make enough food for themselves, they were more susceptible to climate change. So you kind of had a double whammy on the trees. So they were caught in this cycle of not making enough food, not enough growth, not enough growth, not making enough food, not enough growth, not making enough food. That's kind of what they were doing. All right, that was kind of the cycle they were in, all of the trees. Okay, now we have two situations now after the fire, and we've worked on both these situations in here. First, the trees that have some green on them. Okay, those trees, we work with the trees to increase photosynthesis, to make more food, and bring them back into a loop where they're making more food to support themselves, which means more growth, okay, and then more food, okay, kind of that loop, okay, so that they would become healthier trees, okay. That's we work with the internal functionality of the trees in order to do this. All right. The other situation we had was trees that are burnt. Well, they aren't as fortunate because they got a little more harder work to do. But what they have to do is break down some stored food because they don't have any food in there. They're not doing photosynthesis right now. They've got some stored food. They have to break down that stored food, drive some circulation, drive food and fluid out to tissues that can differentiate into new buds, either leaf buds or needle buds, depending on what the type of the tree is, okay? And then those buds would then grow into leaves or needles, and then that would create more food for the tree, and it would gradually begin a cycle of enough food, start making food for itself, and start to get healthier, and it could grow more, and so make a little more food, grow a little bit more, make a little more food, grow a little more, and then come back, eventually come into that first cycle I talked to you about, which was increased photosynthesis, get the food, really get it going, really pump up the photosynthesis so they really have a good amount of food. And then that creates more growth, more food for the tree. And then eventually you bring back the whole forest as a nice, equal, healthy forest. That's what you want to have. So you have both the green trees, they'll be healthy, and the ones that burnt, the ones that burnt, I mean, some of them are so crispy, they won't come back. But those that have the ability to come back can break down food and differentiate tissue and put on new leaves and needles and make more food. So that's what we were up to in this Caldera fire, and that's the work we did, and repair that internal functionality to do that in both those, the trees that were green, still green, and the trees that were burnt but could recover. Thank you.
Great.
And we'll take any discussion or any questions anybody might have.
Well, thank you. I think we have a very full program today, Jim and Basha. So I will thank you for that, and we'll probably be in touch with you over the next couple of days as you complete your journey there. But on behalf of all of us, I really want to thank you very deeply for everything that you're doing to nurture the trees under this extraordinary situation of duress. As you said, that they're experiencing a double whammy. It sounds like most of the planet, actually. The oceans are also starving while they're warming, and the two are interactive together. So that situation is refracted throughout most of the planetary ecology, I'm afraid. But thank you so much for everything that you've done to contribute also to our program over the last couple of days. So thank you.
Thank you. And we have another discussion for another day with you concerning the purpose of the fires, both the Dixie fire and the Caldera fire, what the purpose of those fires were. And we'll bring that into you. Okay, another day. Thank you.
Well,
our main website is partnerwithnature.org, and Dr. Jim's website is thetreewhisperer.com. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Now I'd like to turn it over to my good friend and colleague, Ed Muller, who you all know is the president of the University of International Cooperation in Costa Rica, also the founder of Regenerate Costa Rica, who's been very active globally on issues related to biodiversity and regeneration for many, many years. And this is the third of 4 panels that he's convening for the Humanity Rising special program on the COP. So Ed, thank you so much. And I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. This has been fun setting up this session. The ocean is so important, but there are not too many people really doing good stuff, and most of them are very busy. So I'm really happy that we have Max and Randall, and actually Carolina Ramirez, who's hopefully going to join us. Apparently there was a short circuit in her town and they're out of electricity. So there's no Wi-Fi, no internet. So she called me on the cell phone and she's driving to somewhere to see if she can connect. I'll just show a few very quick introductory slides because the oceans are really a center point of humanity's existence and the planetary existence. And we are looking at a lot of negative news, acidification, the dead spots. I mean, the marine dead spots or dead zones are increasing so rapidly. The acidification of the oceans, the bleaching, we've seen the big reefs just die off over a few days. But I'm not going to go into that negative part. We have so much positive happening. And the message today from our speakers is, what are things that are happening? So we already crossed the barrier of traditional management of nature. Because in the case of oceans, a little bit less than half the population of the planet depends on the oceans for their livelihoods. And these communities have to be involved. They have to be part of the process. This cannot be something that's designed from the government or from a big international NGO organization. And we've learned that. We've also learned the ridge to reef. So in my country, every time it rains, this is what happens to the ocean. And of course, the surfers are pissed off and the divers are not very happy because they cannot see through that water. But just think about the amount of soil that you have to pump into the rivers and pump into the ocean to turn a huge part of our coast to brown color. Our countries are losing up to 200 tons of topsoil per hectare per year. That's about 30 trucks full of soil that are dumped into the rivers. So we are advancing in understanding that we cannot just work on the ocean without bringing the top of the mountain into the work we're doing. We also have learned that conservation is coming through the use. So we're actually seeing very many success stories of local fishermen actually bringing the fisheries back if they're allowed to work with nature. And the conservation of many different areas that are actually protected by local communities. And the Biosphere Reserve Network of UNESCO has been a good example for this. It's actually a lot of the big corporations that are not respecting these rights. And we see the case in my country where the tuna fisheries have traditionally just plundered our fish stock, and what they pay in terms of license and fees is really nothing. So we've gone there. In terms of corals, this is my passion. Actually, the picture on top is one of my aquariums a few years ago when I had time to take care of reefs. A lot of the coral breeding processes have been learned from a hobby, not from scientists. And now it's coming into the scientific world of coral restoration, regeneration. David was going to be with us, but he's now on his way between two islands in the South Pacific. He's doing the regeneration of coral reefs there. And Valerie was also invited to come, but they just got spawning and they're doing reproductive propagation of sexual reproduction of corals in Curacao. So she couldn't join us, but the reef reconstruction is advancing tremendously. David told me they have the genomes of many of the coral species and varieties in the Caribbean mapped out. And they're now able to actually select corals to restore the reefs that have genes that are more resilient to bleaching, more resilient to warm waters, more resilient to acidification. So we have a chance to actually help nature with technology regenerate itself. And this gives me a lot of hope that my children can still, and my grandchildren can still see the abundance of life, and not only in their living rooms with an aquarium like this one. And I'm proud to say that, again, Costa Rica put its head in front at the COP. And this is actually not a new project. I actually worked on part of this initial phase about 10, 15 years ago. But uniting one of the most important and biodiverse areas of Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, and Costa Rica with the Galapagos Islands, the Cocos Islands, Malpelo, Gorgona, and Coiba, which is a corridor for sharks and for a lot of other species. So my good friend Randall will come and tell us a bit more about how and why are these sharks so important, and the protection of these areas are fundamental. This is areas that are constantly invaded by illegal fishing, piracy, and so much. So we're looking at hope in regenerating the future of the planet by working with the oceans. So I would like to invite a good friend who I haven't seen in a long time. This is actually the first time I'll see him on video, Max. I was engaged with several projects with Max back when he was in forestry in southern Chile. And Max is now doing some marvelous stuff in terms of the ocean. So I'll pass it on to you, Max. Maybe you can say a few words about yourself and Mission Blue. We all know Mission Blue. It's a huge initiative from one of the ladies that I most admire. So Max, just please go ahead and tell us a few things about what's happening there and what your vision is and all your work.
Sure. Thank you so much, Edward. It's also a pleasure to see you. You're a good, dear friend of mine, and I really admire what you have done in your life. You were also my teacher when I was at the university there. I am very proud to have been actually, been through the university there in Costa Rica. I learned a lot of stuff from you and many other great people there. And then also having the possibility of sharing this with Randall, which is a very good old friend of mine too, and it's one of my heroes too. And so it's great to be all together. And that's how we should work. No, I mean, I think this is about cooperation and how we actually leave the egos behind, because it's not about us. It's not about even our organizations. It's about everyone, and it's about the ocean. And the ocean, it's the actual force that has been driving life on Earth. And if we should call the planet Earth the planet ocean. Actually, is where life comes from, and most biodiversity, biggest sequester, sinking of carbon. It's the 50% of the historical oxygen is being produced there. I mean, it's everything we are, everything we will become. It's coming from the ocean. So thank you so much for the presentation, and it's a pleasure for me to share from Glasgow. As you see, I escaped here a little bit from the meetings and all the stuff, and it's a pleasure for me to be with you here and sharing what we are doing all collectively with Randall, with you, Edward, with many others, and how we protect this amazing corridor. Thank you. Do you want me to continue talking about this, or you want?
Just okay. Go ahead and awesome. Talk your part, and then I'll pass it to Randall.
Yeah. So for a long time, many scientists have been showing us information about the connectivity in this region that goes far beyond this announcement that you might have seen in last Tuesday here at COP26. Ecuador, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama, kicked also by the Panama a couple of months ago, a campaign that I also lead there for a couple of years. They are starting to extend their marine protected areas so they can reach out to their borders, and then they can connect as one area. This will be the first multinational marine protected area. And I think it's just a reflection on how we should be looking into conservation now. When you look into the numbers, when you see, for example, the industry, the tuna fleet industry, they think globally. They have vessels in Vanuatu, they have vessels in the Indian Ocean, they have vessels all around the world. Why we are not thinking the same way? Why we are not thinking, we're always thinking like, I'm going to take this little piece of the ocean, but am I going to be protected or not? Am I going to still let, some fishing? 3% of the ocean is highly and fully protected, which are the areas that actually the scientist says that they are the most valuable. They produce 7 times more biomass. They produce more, resilient for the ocean. They are a source of biodiversity. We have proved marine protected areas to work for many years. Actually, the Polynesian have tried them for more than 1,000 years. They call them rahui, they call them tapus. I mean, there are many names and many places. Communities before us, they've tried marine protected areas. So yes, it's a 3%, and as Sylvia always will say, you know, I have two news, no, one bad, one good. The bad news is we have 3%. The good news is we have 3%. It depends on how we look into these things, no? And I think we're in such an important moment in history, in humanity. We, you, Edward, and many others, all the people that are looking at here, and many other, there are now in this moment in humanity and history, we have the capacity to change for good, to change the world, to change the way that we've been communicating, we've been relating with nature. And I think this moment we need to use it. We have the power. Now we know that we can change. Now we know that actually we've been damaging the ocean and we still have a functional ocean. And that is the key thing. We haven't lost the battle. We should not lose it, because we are in a moment where we can change things. So I think the possibilities that opens this multinational marine protected area in a region that even had issues before in terms of frontiers. Ecuador and Costa Rica, for a long time, they were fighting where was the line that divided them. Now they're thinking of a binational marine protected area there. I mean, what a beautiful news, no? From that sort of like more aggressive sort of way, and to see what is mine, what is yours. Now thinking about what is ours, or actually it's not even ours. It belongs to the world itself, no? And so now the question is like how far we can go. Is it we need to go further? My dreams, and I like to dream bigger. I've been dreaming about this, and I know you, Edward, and many others, and Branda in particular, have been dreaming about this news. It's bigger than this. This is a great step, and I think we have so much to work. We need to recognize also, and we need to stop sometimes looking in the back. You know, sometimes you walk and you see far away where you need to get, and you feel like, oh God, it's so far. But then when you look back and you see how much you've been actually walking, you realize, wow, I did it. We did it. We walk all this way here, and so why not to get there? No. And I think we need to recognize this incredible moment, this incredible step now to get in this communication, this incredible announcement. And now what else? There's the high seas. The high seas cover 60% of the oceans. So 70% of the earth is covered by water. Of that, 60% it's outside of the economic exclusive zones of the countries. That means there's a huge part that we still use for, and we need to continue working on that. So I wanted to thank you all. I want to give you a message of hope, a message of accomplishment. We're all part of this. When we talk about the ocean, if you like to breathe, well, then you need to, take care of the ocean. Everybody likes to breathe, and at least one of those two breath belongs to the ocean. So we need to give thanks to the ocean, and we need to give back to the ocean. And no matter how far you are, if you live in the Sierra, in the mountains, whatever, you're still connected with the ocean. You always will be. So let's give back something to the ocean. Let's do something together and feel part of this accomplishment, because it's everyone. Not me, not one institution, but everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for inspiring us. And thank you for taking the time of escaping your commitments there at Glasgow to talk with us. I'll pass it on right to Randall. Randall has been an inspiration for me. The work he does, I hear a voice that probably keeps our president awake at night of having to answer to Randall's things from time to time. But he's also a brilliant scientist and doing some really great work. So Randall, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward, and hi everybody, and good morning here in Costa Rica, at least. And yes, this was a very encouraging announcement from coming from the COP and the 4 countries, Costa Rica, Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama. And what it really was, though, was a commitment. It was an agreement. It doesn't really mean anything yet, but I guess it's going to depend on us for it to mean something. Edward, you just now mentioned that you were involved with this process in 2004. And I would just like to remind everybody too that in 2004, a statement pretty much the same as the one that was just signed was signed by the ministers of the environment of these 4 countries. And pretty much the same statement that, you know, we were going to do the research, that we were going to work together through the ministries of environment to identify these corridors and to protect them and to protect these highly migratory marine species that were in urgent need of this protection. And, you know, this was 17 years ago. And now we have the same commitment emanating from the same countries. And I think the value in this commitment is that we have to tell these presidents, okay, this commitment needs to be turned into actions. And we need these actions now. You know, these commitments aren't really going to take us anywhere, just like action plans, strategies, you know, and plans are not going to take us anywhere either. We have plenty of all of these, and now the time to act is now. You know, we really have to emphasize that, especially like a country like Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a leader. It's a natural leader. When people talk about Costa Rica, they think about ecotourism, conservation of nature. And the current president only has a few months to pull this off. We have elections in February, and whatever it doesn't get pulled off now means starting from zero again next year. So the issue is impelling, and we need the Costa Rican government to act now. If we look at Ecuador, well, Ecuador already made the announcement that 30% or 30,000 square kilometers are going to be extended for an exclusive no-take area to connect with Costa Rica. Great announcement. Panama already created a greater marine protected area covering 30% of its EEZ. Colombia also has extended its marine protected areas around Malpelo. So all these countries have already taken decisive steps towards this. But when we look at Costa Rica right now only has a 2,000 square kilometer no-take area around Cocos Island, which doesn't compare with Malpelo's 27,000 no-take. And it definitely doesn't compare with Ecuador's 130,000 square reserve around Galapagos. So Costa Rica is lagging behind, and it's really got to step it up now. And I think that's the message. If Costa Rica signed this agreement, the president did, you know, fantastic. Let's move on. And right now, Costa Rica is in a process in which negotiations are still being held. Discussions are still being held with the fishing sector. The fishing sector has been a great opponent to this initiative. And, you know, the science is there. I've been working on the science for years. The science is there. The technical justification is there. We're talking about critically endangered species like leatherback turtles, hammerhead sharks. And being on the critically endangered list means these species only have 20 years for action, or otherwise they're going to go extinct. We cannot allow that to happen. And when animals are critically endangered, that means we need critical measures to save them. It doesn't mean we can slow down on the catch, or we can start managing the catch, or we need better information to act. It means if we don't act now, they're going to be gone. And we can't allow that to happen. And with the leatherback turtles, they entered the critically endangered list 20 years ago. And they're more endangered now than ever. We keep on seeing their numbers dwindle. And hammerhead sharks were listed critically endangered 2 years ago. And we still need to act. So my call here is just an impelling call to all these 4 governments. Let's get our act together, and especially let's gang up on Costa Rica. Costa Rica is lagging behind, and we need Costa Rica to be that leader that everybody expects it to be. And, you know, once Costa Rica takes the lead on these issues, lots of countries follow. Let's remember in 2013, Costa Rica took the lead to protect hammerhead sharks under the Convention for the International Trade of Endangered Species at CITES. And I remember when Costa Rica took this lead, Brazil jumped on board right away. And I remember many countries and even colleagues saying, Randall, this isn't going to happen. It's going to be too hard to put hammerhead sharks on Appendix 2. It's going to be an uphill battle. But we did it. It was an uphill battle, but we won by 5 votes. Remember, CITES is 177 countries. You need to win by a 2/3 majority. It was a monumental battle, but we won, and we listed hammerhead sharks. This other battle that's coming up, creating these corridors, making them no-take, and providing these animals with the conservation policies that they need, is another battle. But we're in that battle right now. And this is why it's so important for Costa Rica to step it up and to follow up with this agreement that Costa Rica just signed. If we signed it, we got to do it. We got to do it now, and we got to do it before the next couple of months, because time is the limiting factor. So, you know, let's take advantage of this call, and let's move forward with this.
Brenda, why is it important that we have sharks? Tell us a little bit about the physiology of the ocean and why sharks are so critical for the oceans, why every second breath, as Max said, is produced by the ocean. And that only happens if we have sharks actually in the system. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the important thing about sharks is it's not an imminent extinction. It's not, it's something that's happening right before our eyes. And, you know, these populations are plummeting. We know it's a huge problem. Countries are addressing the problem. You know, we have conventions, you know, and that they're supposed to save these animals, but we're not seeing these actions land on the ground, and we need these actions now. And the reason why the sharks are so important is because, you know, they're the architects of the ecosystem. You know, we always say they're the apex predators. They're on the very top of the food chain, and as such, they exert all these pressures on the animals that they feed on. And, you know, if we look at a very simple food chain, you have the apex predators, you have the mesopredators, which are like snappers, other shark species, rays, that are also predatory animals, but they get eaten by the sharks. But then underneath these mesopredators, you have the algae feeders and the lower animals in the ecosystem. So basically what happens is, once you remove the sharks, then you have these changes in the ecosystem where the mesopredators don't have any animals checking in on their populations. So once the apex predator is gone, these mesopredators and the relationships in between them start changing. And now some of these animals start reproducing at higher rates than they should, and they start outcompeting other mesopredators. And what happens is you end up with lower diversity. Remember, a very important principle in the tropics is diversity fosters diversity. So if you have a diversity of predators, you have a diversity of preyed upon. But once you don't have that diversity of predators, the preyed upon predators diminish in their diversity. And then what happens underneath them? If you start having too many of these, if one of these mesopredators starts taking over, then they become too abundant and they start feeding on too many of these animals underneath them. And then you start having the disbalances in the ecosystem, which can have impacts on the whole productivity of the ocean. So for instance, there's many examples, but I'm just going to show you a few. For instance, you have a coral reef. You remove the apex predators from the coral reef, and then what happens? There start being too many mesopredators because there's no one controlling their population. And then the mesopredators eat all the algae feeders. And then if there's no algae feeders, the reef becomes overtaken by the algae. And then by removing the sharks, you end up with reefs that are conquered by nothing but algae because of the absence of the algae feeders. So it's always a chain of events going down. For instance, in Costa Rica, we have another good example. We are studying the bull sharks in river mouths, and there's an area I work in where there's a very productive snapper fishery. The area is surrounded by mangrove swamps, and the mangroves serve as rookeries for small snappers, and it's also a rookery for the bull sharks. Well, sometimes people come and fish in these river mouths and they catch baby bull sharks and they kill them. And they think, oh, the baby bull sharks or these juveniles take the bait, they're a pain. And, you know, they want to get rid of these sharks. They don't like them. They're bad for the fishery, they say. But now that we've been doing these studies with stable isotopes, we can tell the fishermen, hey, wait a moment. Do you know what the bull sharks are eating? The bull sharks are eating catfish, which are also very abundant. Well, what are the catfish eating? Well, we're doing the stomach content analysis now, but we're seeing that the catfish are eating lots of little fish, and they're eating necessarily sometimes baby snappers. So if you're interested in the fishery, what's going to happen if you remove all the bull sharks when you're fishing in these river mouths? Well, nobody's going to control the catfish populations. So then the catfish populations are going to reproduce out of control. And what if they start eating too many of the baby snappers? That can impact the commercial snapper fishery. So these are connections that we can infer that could happen with the absence of these apex predators. Once you remove the apex predators, everything underneath the ecosystem is going to start shifting, and the changes in the ecosystem could mean not such good fisheries. So in a nutshell, what we need are healthy ecosystems with their diversity of predators. So we have the diversity of preyed upon underneath them under control. So we have all these elements in the ecosystem. And let's remember, biodiversity conservation is a human right, because for the ocean to provide these ecosystem services that we need, they need to be healthy. And being healthy means they need all the elements of the ecosystem. We need the biodiversity. So conserving our apex predators is conserving biodiversity, and it's preserving the human rights of the people and everyone who depends on the marine ecosystem for its ecosystem services, which is all of humanity.
Yeah, I think I remember in the year 2000 or something like that, when the biosphere reserve in Seaflower in Colombia was established, which was at the time 10% of the Caribbean before the court in The Hague gave part of that marine territory to Nicaragua. But working with the fishing communities, they opposed it severely. And then 5 years later, they were the biggest defenders, and they wanted more no-take zones because their fisheries just popped back. And that's what we don't understand. It's the same thing. And I see many of the traditional policies which are actually not doing good. Like everybody says we have to catch the big fish and release the small fish. Well, a big female can produce 5 million eggs, whereas a small female can produce 100,000 eggs. So if we take only the big ones, we're actually taking those that are reproducing most and not allowing for the population. So these no-take zones, they actually, and you're more of an expert than I, but maybe you or Max can say something about it. What has happened with these protected areas is that the fish stocks recover so quickly, just like they did in our coast during COVID when fishermen weren't allowed to go out, and fish stocks just came back really quickly, that they start getting overpopulated in the protected no-take zones, and they start migrating out and replenishing the fisheries. So this dynamics, I think, has to be incorporated into our way of thinking. It's this holistic approach. When I see linear actions like fertilizing with iron so that the algae can fix the CO2 and revert climate change with that, without looking at the consequences of putting all this iron into the oceans and affecting the whole food chain afterwards. I mean, how do we actually change our way of looking at science from all these wrong measures to looking at it as a real evolving process of nature that has millions of years for us to learn from? I just hand it on to whoever you.
Okay. I would just like to add to that I've worked with a lot of types of fishermen. I've worked with shrimp trawlers, I've worked with longliners, and I've worked with small scale fishermen. And there's a huge difference. When I work with small scale fishermen, you're talking to a small fisherman who has his own panga, or probably a few pangas, small boats, and they get it. You know, that they get marine protected areas, they get sustainability. You know, they know that there's times of the year when they shouldn't fish. They know that they understand about all these things. When I talk to them, they know the value of marine protected areas and of protecting them strictly. It's a group that is just more open to these types of management. When I've been working with the large fishermen, though, usually I'm dealing with a businessman who's not on his boat, or you know, he contracts his boat, or somebody else works on his boat. These are people who are in debt, and these are people who, you know, they might get sustainability, but their main problem is economic. You know, they went through a period of big economic success a couple of decades ago. They missed those days, and they want them to come back. And, they think sometimes in their own mind that there's too much conservation already, that conservation is their problem. That, that if the conservationists would go away, fisheries would rebound and be back the way they used to be, because they can't fish the way they used to because of all these conservation measures. And, and that's the problem, because these people, at least in Costa Rica and most of these countries, are the ones responsible for establishing fishery policy. And these are the ones who have been resistant to these changes. So, that these are the changes that need to be done. And yes, we need to address many of these issues, and, how fisheries get better by closing down some of these fisheries, and the fisheries will actually get better outside of them. And, small scale fishermen, again, they get it, but the big guys, for them, this is a matter of too much conservation, and they just want to keep on fishing. And it's kind of like things are going to get better if we keep on doing things the way we've always done them. We're going to get different results with the same kind of procedures that we've done forever. And of course, we need to change, and things will get better. Fisheries will get better if we start implementing these conservation measures. But things aren't going to get better if we keep on doing things the way we've done them forever. But again, this is a political problem that's very enrooted in our countries. And, again, we have to take advantage of our, the commitments of our presidents to improve these marine conservation policies. Well, let's adopt them, and let's put our governments on the spot, and, things will get better for fisheries. There's definitely a crisis, but the crisis is because of overfishing. The crisis is not because of over-conservation, like sometimes they want to make us feel.
So over to you.
Yeah, I wanted to add to one of the craziest thing also, to see that a fish doesn't have a value until you have killed it. I mean, then it has a price in the market. Then you can make money out of it. What is the price of a living fish? What is the price of actually leaving that fish in the water? No, and when you understand what Randall was saying, there are communities that actually they're more vulnerable, and they live directly from consuming those fish that actually sustain their families and everything. But this other group, which is the industry, the fish basically for luxury. No, I mean, the people who have the capacity of buying tuna, it's really people who have money to actually decide whether they want to eat tuna or something else. Just let's look at the salmon farming. And I'm from Chile, and of course we have a huge impact of the salmon farming producing. For what? It's not for food security. It's not for people that needs to eat salmon. It's for being in in the sushi. It's for being in a someone else plate on a fancy restaurant. That is what we are talking. And so the key also is to think, is that necessary? Do we really need to do that to the ocean? I mean, again, like what Sylvia normally says, is the most important thing we extract from the ocean, it's our own existence. And if we keep thinking about how do we make money out of this, that's not the answer. That is not the point. It's how we actually live with the ocean, as we've been doing it for millions of years, and how we actually change our attitude toward the ocean, and just not making money out of it, but actually saving it because of our own sort of existence.
And here, Max, and when I started out, I said 3 billion people's livelihoods depend on the ocean. So it's I saw in one of the comments, let's turn vegan for 10 years and get the oceans back. Well, a lot of these 3 billion people would starve to get the oceans back. So, as Randall said, they are the ones that are conscious about the fishing policies and what they need to do to conserve the fisheries. It's a lot of the big fisheries that are actually doing a lot of the damage. And the same thing in Chile. I mean, it's the big companies that don't respect. And just 3 years ago, 700 salmons escaped from one company. And if they managed to fish 10% with nobody controlling them, they were off the hook. So they had to catch 7,000 salmons back, report it. Nobody was there counting the salmons that they caught back. and they were off the hook with fines and everything else. And they can go on destroying the ecosystem. And we see these salmon fisheries going from the mid-south Chile all the way now into Tierra del Fuego, because they already killed the ecosystems up north. So when are we going to actually change this around? What are the good stories? So I know Mission Blue is doing a lot of work for this future. Can you tell us a few things about beautiful, inspiring initiatives that you're all?
Okay, well, I can tell you a little bit about the work I'm doing on the southern Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica. And I started a project there in 1998, working on the sea turtle beaches at nesting populations. And they're not like protected areas, but they're little coastal communities that have nesting turtles on their beaches. And we started working with them so they can make a living off the turtles in tourism instead of poaching the eggs and selling them in the cantinas. And the project was very successful. Now we work on 5 different communities. But over the years, we started working with more and more more and more of these coastal communities. We ended up working with fishermen, small-scale snapper fishermen that are embedded within these turtle communities. And over the years, we ended up creating 2 marine protected areas, over 50,000 square kilometers of multiple use areas. And when we started creating these areas, it was first to fight the shrimp trawl industry, because the small-scale fishermen I work with are small-scale snapper fishermen. And their problem was that every time the snapper fishing got good, the shrimp trawlers would move in and catch all the snappers, and it kept, of course, kill a bunch of turtles. So the turtle people were upset because they were protecting turtles on the beach and dead turtles were washing up. And then the snapper fishermen were upset because the shrimp trawlers were taking all the snappers. So we decided to help them create marine protected areas, multiple use, where we could limit the fisheries, especially the snapper fisheries. And in exchange, the fishermen have allowed us to collect fishery data on their fisheries. And over the years, we also went through a Marine Stewardship Council sustainability certification, and we obtained a pre-certification. We proved that the way that they catch their snapper is sustainable. So now we're trying to work with the Ministry of the Environment and with these communities, because now we have an amalgam of 5 different marine protected areas under 3 different conservation statuses under the Ministry of the Environment. So we're trying to turn this amalgam of marine protected areas into a single unit and assist the Ministry of the Environment to work in turtle conservation, sustainable fishery, mangrove conservation. We also have bull sharks, manta rays in the region that also aggregate. So we're trying to put this all together in what we call a marine, an integrated coastal marine program, where we're working with the different actors and protecting all these different endangered species. So there is hope. We're working with these communities, and we want to try to develop a model on how this can be done. And just to to add a little bit more, like to that there are solutions to this. It's not a matter of it would be great if we could just stop eating fish altogether, but we have all these small scale communities and people who also rely on the oceans. We just can't cut them out. And we believe that there are ways that this can be done. Like I said, there's the small scale fishermen and there's the big scale fishermen. And for the big scale fishermen, there's also solutions. For instance, stop catching sharks and stop killing them. And that is possible. For instance, if we read now about the status of tunas, for instance, yellowfin tuna and other tuna, their populations are recovering. And they were actually downlisted from the endangered species list recently because these populations are being managed sustainably, apparently, and they are recovering. But the big news is that even though these tuna populations are recovering, shark populations continue to decline. And one of the reasons is because the industrial fishermen always say, oh, well, it was bycatch. We can't do anything about these sharks anyway. It's just bycatch. So let's keep on commercializing them. What we need is a total ban on endangered shark species retention and commercialization. And this will lead towards a more organized management of these fisheries in the ocean, especially the longline fisheries. But the point is, that there are actions that can be done. But of course, until they're done, for instance, I don't eat fish anymore unless it's with the fishermen I know. And I know it's a small scale fisherman that caught it, and we would like to provide these fish to other people, but I never buy fish in restaurants. I never buy fish in the supermarkets. because I don't know where it's coming from. And that's the recommendation I would make to most people if you're concerned about these issues. Just don't buy any fish, or just don't say, oh, well, it's, fish, who cares? Know where your fish is coming from. And if you don't know, yeah, refrain from buying it. But there are solutions and there are ways to move forward. And we have to find fishermen that are willing to work this way.
On our side, on Mission Blue, we've had, Sylvia create this denomination called the Hope Spots. And it's a great idea to actually call attention for those places where we need to protect, that there are still places worth it to do something for them, but also that they're connected with people working on them. A matter of fact, Randall is one of our champions. We call them champions for Cocos Island, because it's he's been years and years, fighting for that beautiful treasure Costa Rica has. Just 2 months ago, we got this new marine protected area we mentioned before in Panama, 68,000 kilometers square of new protection, highly and fully. And I want to mention this, highly and fully are very critical. It's not how much we protect in terms of percentage, but the quality of the protection is probably more important than the number. And so that quality and what Panama did is an incredible thing. 68,000 kilometers square. The country has 73,000 kilometers square. The area is almost as big as the country itself. And that was the keystone for getting all of this announcement that you've seen this week. So that was an incredible thing. Chile, and this is one of the beautiful things that I have the pleasure to say. My own country, I work there for getting the marine protected areas. Chile have this 10th biggest economic exclusive zone on Earth. And if someone would ask me 20 years ago, like, hey, where do you think it's going to be, in 20 more years in terms of marine protection, I would, or someone says it's going to be 43%, I would say, like, no way, there's no way that we can do that, we can get that. And actually we did it. We did it, and so it's almost 50% of one of the biggest economic exclusive zone under highly and fully protection. And so those are good news that we need to celebrate, and I think it shows that we can do it. We can turn our site to the ocean, and it is about time we do it. With people like Randall, like people like you, see what you can do. Vote for the people. Do what you can do. And I don't know, many of you might be from California. California have a big step to take also on 30% of protection for highly and fully marine protected areas. Marine protected areas are good for the ocean, and they're good even for the fishermen. It's not taken out of someone. It's actually exactly the opposite. It's like going to the cash machine. If you think that you're gonna keep taking out of the cash machine forever, you know that it's wrong. You need to put money into. You need to invest. We need to invest in life. We need to invest in the ocean, and that's the only way that we will be able to survive. And this fishermen and everyone, for sure. So there's plenty of other good stories. I invite you to follow Sylvia Earle and Mission Blue and the Hope Spots to see many of those stories of many, many people that are working around the world to do that.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up to the floor if there are any questions. I've been following the chat, and there's not much of questions, but if somebody has some concrete questions to ask, please come forward. There's so much to discuss on the ocean, and we know we don't have the time today, but please come up and ask any questions. Yeah, Jim, go ahead, please.
Well, first of all, Ed, Randall, and Max, thank you so much. It's really inspiring what you're speaking about. Among other things, I hadn't taken in, Ed, till you folks mentioned it, that, we think of taking the big fish and leaving the little fish because we're kind of sorry for the little fish. And we figure the big fish are a little older and they sort of are a little bit more expendable. But you're right. They're in many ways more precious and valuable than the little fish, which raises real questions about, how we fish. But, the question that I'd like to have you comment on is the ocean as a tipping point right now. Because we've got all kinds of tipping points out there. We've passed, 350 parts per million, which was supposed to be the tipping point. We're now at 420. The Arctic is in irreversible melt. The ice sheet on Greenland, Antarctica is teetering. Would love to hear your perspectives on what the tipping point means in relationship to the ocean, and where are we in relationship to that tipping point as you understand the oceanic ecology today?
That's the question on to the experts. I'm only an expert in my reef aquariums, but actually, what's interesting is it's not one tipping point. We're at tipping points with fertilizers. We're at tipping points with plastic pollution, and now the microplastics, which when you eat by shellfish, you're automatically ingesting a bunch of plastic. It's already affecting the whole ecosystem and the value chains all the way to the humans that are eating it. We are seeing these red tides more and more. We're seeing the anoxic conditions spreading exponentially. There are areas, the Gulf of Mumbai is basically dead, and that's 60,000 square kilometers without oxygen because of the amount of organic pollutants that then produce the algae bloom. So there are many, many tipping points. That's acidification. We're seeing some of the plankton groups that are not reaching their full body weight because of the inability to fix calcium in an acidic condition. So the whole metabolism of calcium and carbonate is now affecting, and we see more and more shellfish also losing the capacity to build their calcium structures. We're seeing the reefs lose in altitude, and that keeps their protection for storms coming to erode the beaches. So the reefs dying is not only a reef problem, a biodiversity problem for the reef, it's actually the impacts on land. And so it's also tied together, and there are all these different tipping points that have all different ways. We have a good friend of mine who runs the 5-minute beach cleanup and has gone now global. And the amount of plastic they pull out on every time they go to the beach, it's just amazing. But we're at the end of the thing, and that's what Randall said. If we keep on just cleaning up the beaches, and Coca-Cola can still produce all those plastic bottles that are thrown out,
Totally.
we won't stop it. So we need to change humanity, and that's why regeneration is holistic. It's at all levels. It's political, it's social, it's cultural. We have to quit buying these drinks in disposable water. We have to quit buying all this one-way plastic that ends up in the oceans. And so, but I'll pass it on. I don't know if Max wants to go first or Randall, but whoever, to go more on the.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on many things that are true. The most critical part is actually how all of those things act together. Because we tend to think about this in a separate way. But when you have a coral reef that is actually, is dealing with the raise of the temperature, which is affecting and creating some of the bleaching of the coral. But then you have this chemical comes in, like all the fertilizers and the blooming and then also the soil from from the rivers, as you were showing Edward at the beginning. That all act together, overfishing, fishing all these critical animals for that coral reef. So the coral reef have a lot less capacity to resist. I think we need to see this our kind of impact together and not just anymore. We're talking about, for example, the climate change, but we know also we have a crisis on the biodiversity. We have an incredible rate of losing biodiversity around the world, and both actually this discussion it was a certain point together. No, Rio brought all the conversation together, but then it's separated in two different negotiations. That doesn't mean that we can solve one and not the other. We need to solve all of it, and the source of all of this is us. So the good news is, because it's us, we are the ones we can actually change that. You've seen all of this cartoons talking about the dinosaurs. No, they had no chance. They had no possibility to change, the course of meteorites. We have the chance. We have the capacity to actually change our behavior. It would be extremely stupid if we finally, destroy this planet and humanity when we were in charge of changing it. So I think on that, with all of these tipping points, at least we need to remember we have still the capacity. We know the tools to actually fix it. But it's critical that we start yesterday. No, we might be late, but we still have those tools and we still have the capacity to do it.
Now, Max, you're there at the COP, right? Because I was wondering, is there any of this discussion happening there? We've heard about protocols on methane and deforestation, but at least in terms of the popular media, there's been almost no mention of the oceans in any way.
Well, Jim, for over 25 years, there have no been discussion about the ocean as part of the climate. That's what I was telling you.
Yeah.
It's like we tend to see these things apart, no? It's like 75% of the planet is covered by water, and then we're not talking about that. The biggest sinking, body, a sinking of carbon body in the planet, have not been part of that discussion. And so in the previous COP, actually, and I was also working on that. I've been, part of the champions team also of the UK and Chile, and before also in the Chile COP, we were able to name it the Blue COP, because it was the first time that actually a text was included into the Paris Agreement about the ocean. And so there's still more work to do on how that will be included, but we were able, for after 25 years, to actually get something in there through Chile and the work that we were doing. So we need to continue. We will continue. We will. This is endurance. This is not just, as Obama was saying yesterday. This is really a marathon now of work. I hope we all understand our role in this. The role of business is crucial. And I think we've seen some interesting things this last week. I was in meetings, where Bezos, for example, was meeting with the 4 countries that make the announcement, and he promised a lot of resources for that area. We've been also able to put together other resources. There is a lot more interest from business, but not enough. Far from being enough. No, the amount of money that some of them have been making out of destroying the world, I think it needs to also be reflected on how much we actually going to put to restore it, to bring it back. That is important for humanity.
Yeah. Randall, you were going to say something about the oceans at tipping point. Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yeah. Okay. As everyone has mentioned, there's many different tipping points that we're reaching, and it's all coming together. It's not just one single issue, but I work on the shark issue, and the way I see it is, there's matters that we can take care of now, and there's matters that are going to take a little longer, like the fuel consumption and cutting down on the production of CO2 and all that. That's unfortunately going to take longer than we need. This is an impelling issue, but these agreements aren't really taking it as far as we need, right now. So basically, we're talking about climate change, and I've seen that now most of the discussion is, well, climate change is happening, or it's happened, and we need to adapt. And we're thinking about the future. We need to adapt to these changes because they're coming. And to adapt to these changes, we need the ecosystems to be resilient. So we're talking about the future. And to adapt to these future changes that are coming, and some have arrived, we need the oceans to be resilient. And what does that mean? We need the oceans, their ecosystems, to be complete and full, so that the oceans can adapt to these changes that are coming. More acidification, and more of these problems are coming. We need the ocean to be able to adapt, to be resilient. But if we're wiping the sharks out now, in the future, the oceans won't be able to be resilient. So, there are actions that we can take now. And one of them is, and all the governments of the world need to take this seriously, we need to stop commercializing endangered shark species. We have them on international conventions. We have them on different appendixes, but everybody keeps on fishing them out. And if we don't do something about that now, the oceans aren't going to be resilient in the future. And that makes all this talk about climate change empty. We need to do something now about these sharks, and it's something that we can do now. Some of these other issues are a lot more difficult to deal with, but we can deal with the extinction of sharks now. That's why we put them on the conventions. But for many reasons, nothing is getting implemented for shark conservation. They keep on being pushed to extinction. And, so why are we going to these climate meetings and talking about resilience and adaptation if we're not taking the measures now so the oceans can adapt? Thanks.
Yeah, there's a question about using kelp as a possible solution. I don't know if any of you know about the kelp. I've seen a few articles, but I know seagrasses and seagrass beds are a huge source for capturing carbon. Now, in this Western world, ocean or the blue carbon hasn't been the highlight as forest carbon has, mainly because who owns the ocean floor and who gets the money and the payments for the carbon. There's been a lot of discussion in mangrove conservation and blue carbon conservation. But I don't know if you have any idea about the kelp and how we can actually stimulate these initiatives of getting a higher resilience in the ocean.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really with direct actions, except for example with the sharks, but we need to act at the whole global level and reverse a lot of the things that end up. The ocean is our open sewer. Even Costa Rica, 80% of our sewer from the cities goes directly to the ocean. If you think of that and you think you're eating the fish and the shrimp that are eating this, but we don't look at the oceans. Many of the countries just gave the back to the oceans, and we don't mind throwing the sewer in there or any wastewater or anything. So it's not only about plastic, it's the whole thing.
So yeah, Edward, that is a very interesting thing that you're mentioning, because we've had a lot of talk this week, and we've been actually working for a while. We are getting together with Parley and Sea Change from South Africa, the people that made the My Octopus t-shirt movie. If you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend you to see it too. Actually, also, I was yesterday with Ali, the director and protagonist of the Seaspiracy 2. It's a good friend of mine. Another movie that someone was mentioning there too, that you should see it too. Kelp forests have been now singled out as one of probably the most important ecosystems on Earth to capture carbon. The problem is how to measure where that carbon can be measured. I mean, in the trees, of course, you go and you measure the the wood, where is the carbon sequester. But on the kelp, it's a little bit more difficult, because most of it then drift maybe down into canyons or other places, might be used into other ecosystems too. So it is critical we understand more about that. But at the same time, I mean, one of the things that we sometimes forget to remember is kelp forests have an incredible capacity to do many things. And as many forests, actually, it's capable of containing incredible amount of biodiversity. The kelp forest you've seen, probably many of you in California, the kelp forest of North America, has been disappearing. 95% of it, it's gone already. And that's because, as Randall was saying, we need to stop the killing. We didn't stop the killing on time for sea otters that were taken for their fur by Russians, by Americans, for the trade years ago. They never recover back to the point that now, the kelp forest is disappearing and will disappear, sadly, in North America. A whole ecosystem will be gone with it. Many species that only can live in that kelp forest will go. So yes, it is important to give an economic value, and in particular now that we're talking about the carbon sequestration capacity to that. But how to put a value onto the value of an ecosystem like kelp forest, and we are trying to imagine. We were having good discussions yesterday in a private meeting we have, and actually need to go now to another exactly about kelp forest with other people, with Carlos Duarte. There's a very well-known scientist also who's been working on this. He's probably the biggest authority on kelp forest. And so we've been talking about how do we actually put together something that protect the kelp forest rather than just using it as again, for food or for creams or cosmetics and everything. But what is the value of actually leaving the kelp forest doing what it's been doing? Just to mention also, the kelp forest is capable of changing the acidification of the ocean. So the places where there's kelp forest, it actually, the acidification that has been affecting the ocean because of the climate change is not the same. It have the capacity to buffer those areas. So we're just learning. We just hear from the IMF, the whales are huge carbon sinking too. Of course, everything, every life, all this fish, all the micro, life that lives in the ocean, that produce most of the oxygen, that produce most of life on Earth, it is actually also a way to actually capture carbon. So we need to think in that holistic way for sure, but we are learning a lot.
Key message: you can put value on nature, but you can't put a price on all of nature. And I think that was a mistake that we made when we started working on ecological economics and trying to put a price on everything. And that actually opened the door to a lot of dark businesses of compensating. And yeah, I'll pay for the damage. And it's not the damage, it's life. We're looking at regenerating life. The future of the planet is there if we regenerate life, if we put humanity in service of life and not on top of the life. So we are not the top, we're not the apex species, or we shouldn't be. We should be in service of life. Jim, I think you wanted to say something else, or?
Well, I was just going to underscore Max's comment about the documentaries. I saw Seaspiracy when it came out, and I found that to be one of the most shocking exposés I think I've ever seen. And the depictions of these trawlers that go in the clear cutting of the ocean floor. Something like 46 billion acres of the ocean have been clear cut. And, upwards of 40-50% of all the catches are bycatches. So they just throw these dead fish back into the ocean. It broke my heart many times over. And that was another question I wanted to ask all of you is, from what the documentary said, this clear cutting, massive commercial clear cutting of the oceans for fish is continuing unimpeded. And
the mining, the deep sea mining that's coming up, lithium and other minerals.
Yeah.
They're going to the ocean floor where they can do all the damage. Nobody's seeing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, when you look, for example, on the shrimp, and Randall knows very well there too that they finally stopped the bottom trawling. It's been a long fight, but if you eat a shrimp, you need to know first that if that shrimp was fished through bottom trawling, probably that shrimp is 1% of 99 other species that were dead because of that shrimp was taken. So the impact of taking that shrimp on your plate, it is pure destruction in the ocean, pure destruction of diversity, things that we might not even know already because they were lost on that process. And then some of the shrimp is being cultivated in places where most of them have been able to be built out of destruction of mangroves. So in order to do the pools where these shrimp is produced, they've been cutting, big industries again, they've been cutting the mangroves to make these incredible places that, that's been destroying. Now what we know is one of the most also important ecosystem for carbon storage. So we need to know more about it. Everyone needs to know more about our impact. We can't just go to the supermarket and buy some. That has a cost. All the things that we do, and of course it's difficult. We all always have an impact for sure. But how to minimize that impact, I think it is critical. And so there are things that maybe we should not, but others maybe that we can. And I think it's a very difficult question of our time, because we're a big population that will continue growing and we'll keep having more access to many other things too.
Yeah, I would just mention too that something that has to change globally is the way we manage bycatch. And what bycatch technically means is it's something unintended. You wanted to catch tuna, you wanted to catch mahi-mahi, and you caught a shark or you caught a turtle, so it's incidental, it's bycatch. We didn't want to, but we got it here. So what has the approach been? Well, since I caught it, I might as well eat it, because if I throw it away, it'll be a waste. And that argument probably holds water when it's truly a bycatch. So for instance, if you go out there and you catch 20 tunas and you caught one shark, okay, that shark was bycatch. You didn't want to catch it, but you caught it. It doesn't matter if you bring it to port. But let's go back to the shrimp trawl industry. When you drag a shrimp trawl net on the bottom of the ocean, here in Costa Rica at least, only 2 to 5% of everything you catch by weight is shrimp. 95% of everything you catch is bycatch, and about 70% of that is small fish. And lots of this fish is retained by the fishermen, and that's actually how they make ends meet. Not because of the shrimp, but they make ends meet with all the fish they catch as bycatch. So in reality, it's a fish trawl industry. They might be going for shrimp, but if they're only catching 5% at best shrimp, I would say shrimp is the bycatch, and they're really catching fish. See, but the thing is, fishery administrators always twist that word around when you go to these fishery meetings, to these regional fishery management organization meetings, and they always twist it around to where bycatch means we can't do anything about it. And when you look at our longline industry, for instance, the same thing happens. During several months of the year, it's a mahi fishery, and most of what they land is mahi. But there's 5 or 6 months of the year when there's no mahi. Mahi is seasonal. And during those 5-6 months of the year, 80% of the longline landings is shark. And they're making their profits off the silky shark fins. So 5 or 6 months of the year, technically speaking, Costa Rica operates a shark targeted fishery. But when you say this in Costa Rica, no, it's not. It's a mahi fishery. Shark are incidental. Why are you fishing mahi when there's no mahi? Well, because we have to fish, we have to eat. And we're catching these 80% incidental shark catch. And it's like, you're targeting sharks. Oh, no, we're not. It's a mahi fishery. So it becomes a circular discussion to where bycatch is just a convenient word to say you can't do anything about it, and you keep on catching it without remorse. And that's what needs to change. That's what's happening with the tuna industry. Like I said, the tuna seem to be doing a little better now, but the sharks are still being pushed to extinction with that same shark fishing effort. With the same fishing effort. So what needs to change is we have to treat these animals as a catch. It's not bycatch, it's a catch and it's a mortality. And when we address it that way, it's a catch and it's a mortality of a critically endangered species that must be protected. Then we can start moving forward on this discussion. But as long as it's bycatch, we can't do anything about it. And it doesn't depend on the amount you're catching. It's just a bycatch. It's just a buzzword to get around the regulations and to keep on doing business as usual. That's what needs to change.
Well, and someone's just put in the chat, Randall, Jacob Matthew, that when they fish for shark, they go for the fin often and cut the fin off and then throw the shark back. So they kill the shark for the fin. So they don't even take everything that they've caught.
Yeah. Well, that strategy kind of backfired on me. The organization I work with now is called Fins Attached. And that name came from our big battles starting the year 2000. We were just starting our shark conservation work, and we still didn't know the status of the shark populations, but we did know that shark finning was bad. And, back then in the year 2000, we were still talking about sustainable use of sharks. So we would say, well, if you're going to catch a shark, use the whole thing. Don't fin it. Don't cut the fin off and bring the body and throw the body and only commercialize the fin. Even though we're sure that lots of that still must be going on. In Costa Rica, at least, the only way you can legally land sharks is if the fins are attached. And what happened with that was that the merchants now are pushing all this shark meat on the Costa Rican consumers. Costa Ricans used to not eat shark, and Costa Rica, shark meat used to be frowned upon, but now they sell the shark meat to the Costa Ricans with all these different names, because if they have to land the shark with the fins attached, then they have all this protein, all this meat, and they push it on the consumers with different names. So now we have to tell everybody, don't eat shark, and shark is sold as cazón, it's sold as bolillo. And here in Costa Rica, during 4 or 5 months of the year, you can go to the supermarket and buy really nice baby, critically endangered hammerhead shark fillets and go make ceviche out of them. You can legally buy them in the docks. You can buy them in the supermarkets. If the commercialization of these animals is open in Costa Rica, it's only illegal to export the products. But you can keep on killing them and commercializing them in Costa Rica. So, of course, that has no conservation benefit.
I would like to just be on the way to closing. Actually, I wanted this to be a positive a meeting of good stories, and it's unavoidable that with the situation we're living, that we land in the negative parts. But maybe we could just have a round of positive news, positive expectations. I think we need to give hope. I have a 9-year-old, and if I tell him all these stories, he doesn't have a future, and he loves the ocean. He loves to go on the rocks and look. So we need to have inspiration. We need to give hope. And I know both of you are really, and you talked a little bit about that, but to close on the upside of marine future, if we can get a message of both of you. And I'm really sorry Carolina didn't make it. She's a young scientist and also works actually very closely to Randall. I wanted to hear a youth voice, a female youth voice that is fighting for the oceans, but her electricity is still out. But if we could just go to that final positive end message,
Yeah.
I think we need it.
Give us some hope, Max, Randall.
No, absolutely, and I think we tend to fall into this spiral, but I see a lot of positive right now. I mean, for me, it's been extremely positive, this announcement last week, getting four presidents together to do this announcement, and they're working actually currently. We continue talking this week with the ministers and everyone of this multinational first marine protected area. I think it is an incredible positive thing. It is positive to have people like Randall actually. Randall has been fighting for many years and having an energy that few times I've seen, in anywhere. I mean, and he is doing incredible work. He's fighting for the sharks, and he's fighting for the sea turtles, and he's fighting for this marine protected areas. This announcement in the part of Costa Rica, and I know he he have his doubts about the how Costa Rica will do it, but I am pretty sure this is gonna happen in the couple next month, and I think it wouldn't happen if it wouldn't be for people like you, Eduard, who've been teaching us and helping us for many years, to me and many others. It wouldn't happen because of people. I mean, it wouldn't happen if we wouldn't have people like Randall. And there are many more heroes. I mean, I see it keeps growing. I mean, the amount of attention of this the whole week I've been in the Guardian, in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, Wall Street Journal 2 years ago wouldn't have been writing about marine protected areas. It did not. I mean, something has changed. I'm telling you, the other day when the expansion of Galapagos happened, the country risk of Ecuador changed. It went down, meaning that actually business and the world saw that Ecuador was doing something good. How we have changed, the even like those measures. Now those measures includes conservation, includes protection. What many of us have seen this week, actually. I know there's a lot of news about like how negative this could be and how far still we are, but I've seen a completely different COP this time here. The feeling and the urgency and the pressure over decision makers here have been incredibly different, very, very different than many other times. Seeing youth like not just Greta, but so many other young people coming here, kids, and talking and wanting to talk to authorities. It's putting so much pressure, and it's been beautiful. We are all part of it. We left it for a long time on their devices, and I think we are now kind of taking control back. And I think those are things that we need to celebrate too. We can make it. We are doing a lot of these things. We need more, yes, for sure, absolutely. But we are doing a good job in many ways, and I think we need to celebrate that ourselves and many of these people like Randall and Edward and many of you for sure. Thank you.
Okay, I would just like to add that it's a matter of political will. And these 4 presidents recently signing this statement to increase the protection of the Eastern Tropical Pacific is definitely good news. But what we really need to do now, and I call on everybody listening on this conversation, we have to put the pressure on the president. We have to let the president of Costa Rica know that he has the full support of the Costa Rican people and of the international conservation community to do this. And we expect him to do this. He's also under a lot of pressure not to do it. That's why we have to be the forces behind. And he already made this announcement. He made this international commitment. So let's make sure he stands next to this international commitment, and let's mobilize the whole world on the Costa Rica and on the president. And let's let the president know that this is what the world expects him to do. And, let's encourage him to do it. So he knows that he can be confident that he has the support of the whole world to move forward, and that there will be no backlash, and any backlash will be repelled by the support of, the whole world, because this is what needs to be done, and Costa Rica needs to do it. So yeah, help me everybody. Let's go for this.
Let's do it. Jim, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Randall. Thank you, Max. This has been sobering and inspiring at the same time. And I want to really express my appreciation for this. And I'd like Ed to have us back for a deeper dive, as it were, into the oceans, because I think, the fact that 26 COPs could go by and the oceans are barely mentioned means that we as civil society we need to do more to bring this to people's attention. And Randall, we could do a whole session just on sharks.
Oh yeah.
People love sharks, and then people, I think, intuitively understand what your central message is that, as the as the top of the food chain, they're in some ways critical to the entire food chain in the oceans. So I'd like to have more sessions on the ocean if the three of you and others, Ed, that you could bring in would be inclined to participate, because it's just so critical. And you're right, there's so many different tipping points in the ocean, all happening at the same time, and most people don't even know it's occurring. So this has been a very important session. So thank you all. Tomorrow we're going to be talking with folks in a parallel universe of the Amazonia and the rainforests, which, like the oceans, play a critical role in the overall planetary ecology. And almost without exception, rainforests everywhere in the world are under dramatic assault by commercial interests, essentially unimpeded, particularly there in Brazil. We'll be hearing from Marina Silva, first up tomorrow from Brazil, and others who are on the front lines of the crusade to save that massive rainforest, which really serves as the lungs of the earth. So that'll be tomorrow on Humanity Rising. But Ed, Randall, Max, thank you all so much. Max, good luck with everything there in Glasgow. And we will see everybody same time, same station tomorrow for climate change in Amazonia. Bye for now.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.